Creating parts is easy. You simply select an eligible object and click the Create Parts button. In this movie, we'll look at the basic process to create parts and consider a few approaches for creating and dividing parts once you have them. So I'm in a file called Elements, and it has several different examples of objects that are eligible for creating parts, like these various walls and this little house over here and so on. And I'm going to just select this simple wall right over here. And you'll notice that the Modify Walls ribbon becomes available. And here on the Create panel, the Parts button will light up right here, Create Parts. That's all you have to do to create your parts. Now, I want to also note that before I actually click that, if you look over here with nothing selected on the Properties palette, Parts visibility is a feature of the view you're in. So we're currently in the view called 3D View, and it says Show Original. As soon as I click this object and click the Create Parts button, if I deselect it, it will switch the parts visibility automatically to Show Parts, which if you think about it kind of makes sense because you wouldn't want to create an element and then not have it appear. So when you're in your view, you get to decide, do I want to see the original object or do I want to see the parts? They're both still there. So parts is kind of interesting that way in that what it's really doing is creating almost like a variation of the original object. So let's look at another example here. This is a basic brick on CMU wall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to a shaded view and spin around to the back side here so we can kind of see the brick. And let's go ahead and zoom in on that. I'm just rolling my wheel on the mouse there. And you can see that there's a brick pattern on the surface of this wall. When I select this wall, this one was a generic wall. So when I turned it to parts, we didn't really see anything change. But this one, when I change it to parts, you're going to see an individual part appear for each layer of this wall. So now I have a part for the bricks. I have another part here for the air gap and for the insulation and for the CMU and so on. So this gives you an example of what parts actually does when you enable it. If I come over here and make sure nothing is selected and back on the 3D views properties, change the display back to show original, that's exactly what it will do. It hides all the parts and it goes back to showing the original object. Now I want to stress that it didn't delete the parts, it just hid them. So if I zoom out a little bit here, take this wall and change it in some way, like maybe shorten it like so, and then turn the parts visibility back on, notice that the parts have reacted to the new shape of the wall. So the parts are dependent on the original object. So if you delete the original object, it will delete the parts. But interestingly, if you delete the parts, that does not delete the original object. So if I switch this display back to show original and I delete this element, it will warn me that the parts associated with that element have also been deleted. But if I change this to show parts, and I highlight this object, you'll see that it's now actually highlighting the part. I select it and I delete. What it's done is just deleted the part in this case and notice that the original wall element is still here. So if you delete a part, you're just removing the part and keeping the original. But if you delete the original, you're actually removing both. So it's important to understand that. So to summarize, to create parts is really very simple. You select an object that's eligible for creating parts, and you click the Create Parts button on the ribbon.